So let's talk a little more about how things shake out in the long run in a perfectly competitive market. So to understand what happens, we can think about signals. So there's like a traffic light here at the top of this slide, right? So think about things that would, in this type of market, that would signal go and things that would signal stop, right? So back in the beginning of the chapter, we talked about the characteristics of a perfectly competitive market, and one of those characteristics that I said would be important to remember when we talked about the long run was that there's free entry and free exit into and out of this market. So you're talking about a market for beans. It's really easy to start selling beans if you want to. You just go out, plow up a little piece of your land and plant some beans, and before you know it, you're selling beans, right? It's really easy to start selling beans. It's really easy to stop selling beans. If you decide one day, I don't care about doing this anymore, you just quit, right? Um, so let's think about the signals that would make people want to start or stop selling beans. Signals convey information about the profitability of a market. So what happens if the existing firms are earning positive or negative profits? If you look around and you see all your neighbors making a ton of money selling beans, what are you going to do? You start selling beans, right? Remember, it's easy to do. It's easy to start selling beans. There's free entry into this market. And so if there's a ton of money being made making or selling beans, then you start selling beans. That's a green light for you. Profit in the market is a green light. It says, "Come on, enter the market. Go. Start selling beans," right? What if folks in the market start making negative profits? People stop wanting beans, people stop paying much for beans, whatever. People start making negative profits. That's a red light, right? It says get out. If you're selling beans, you stop selling beans if negative profits start happening, right? Because it's easy again to exit this market. So because it's easy to enter and exit, you're going to look at these signals. You're going to look at the red lights and the green lights. When firms are making positive profit, you're going to go, you're going to enter, you're going to start selling beans. When firms are making negative profits, you get out. You stop selling beans, right? And the only place that we're sort of in an equilibrium, that we're stable, that people are not coming or going from the market, is at zero profit. The market is in long run equilibrium when there's zero profit, because if there's positive profit, people are coming. If there's negative profit, people are leaving. The only time that people are neither coming nor going is when that profit is zero, right? So let's look at how this all works out, what ends up happening in the long run in these markets. So the graph on the left here is a graph for what's happening in a specific firm in this market, and the graph on the right is the graph for the entire market. So individual firm and market. Here's what a market looks like, right? Our typical supply and demand graph that we're used to from chapters of OR, and the market then comes up with a market price, as we've discussed through the forces of supply and demand. There's a market price right there at the equilibrium where the two cross, and then of course an equilibrium quantity, the total quantity of beans being sold in the whole market, right? How does this all relate to the firm in the market? So the firm is the one with these little cost curves going on, and then the firm also will have, boop, this marginal revenue curve or price curve that's handed to it by the market. So remember, we're in a perfectly competitive market where the firms are price takers. No one gets to pick their price. No one gets to change the price. Nothing that I do will change the price, because there's so much competition on both sides of the market that the price is just determined over on the right hand side by the market and given to me as a firm. So whatever the market price is, whatever the equilibrium price is in the market, is the price at which I'm selling my beans. right? So I'll sell a quantity. Again, we'll go back to our profit maximizing rule. How will I choose what quantity I sell? Well, it's wherever my marginal revenue equals my marginal cost. So in this case, it's the little Q1 there. Is the quantity I will choose. If the price were to move down, if something happened in the market that decreased the market price, what would happen? I'd end up making negative profits, right? That's why we have a little red zone shaded there. If the price went down, then you notice that the gap between my price and my cost, price being my revenue, the gap between my revenue and cost would be negative. Costs are higher than revenues if the price is anywhere down here in this red zone, right? If the price were anywhere higher than where it currently is, I'd be making positive profits because that's where my revenues would be higher than my costs, right? So the point that I'm at right now with that price, where the price is at the bottom of my average total cost curve, right? That is where I have zero economic profit. I don't care about no one wants to come in, no one wants to leave the market. There's no signal being thrown out that you should enter or leave, right? But let something happen over in the market, right? Demand shifts way down. We find out that beans cause high blood pressure or something ridiculous like that, right? Demand shifts down, shifts to the left for beans. What happens to the market price for beans? It falls. Boop. I end up with a price that's below my average total cost. My quantity decreases that I sell, right? So now I'm selling where marginal revenue equals marginal cost. I'm selling over here. And of course, the gap now between my marginal revenue and my average cost is really big. The cost being higher than my revenues. What do? That's a red light. Negative profits. It's a red light. I get out. I leave the industry because I'm making negative profits. What happens when I leave the industry? Negative profits. What happens when I leave the industry? Boop. Over on the market side, the supply curve shifts to the left. Fewer suppliers in the market means a supply curve shift in the market, right? So when the price dropped, we started having negative profits for individual firms, which is a red light. It says get out of the market. People start exiting the market, and when firms exit the market, it means our supply curve shifts to the left over on the market side. What happens when the supply curve shifts to the left? Equilibrium moves again. The price comes back up, and we come back to our original price for the individual firm, where the individual firm is making zero profit. This is the relationship between the market and the firm. And you can see how we always are going to end up in the long run. We're always going to end up at the point where where average total cost equals marginal revenue. We're always going to end up in the long run at the point where there's zero profit. Right? So remember, profit is the space or the difference between our revenues and our costs. And at this particular price, at P1, the space between revenues and costs doesn't exist. There's zero space, right? It's a zero economic profit. And the reason for that is this free entry, free exit thing. And the signals. If something happens over in the market and changes our price away from that equilibrium price where we've got zero economic profit, then that's going to be a signal. And people are either going to enter the market if the signal is green, if that price happened to go up, or people are going to leave the market if the signal is red. And when people enter or leave, it again affects the right-hand side over here. It affects the market, where the supply curve is going to shift to the left if people are leaving, to the right if people are entering, and it's going to move that price back. And we're always going to have that shifting until we get back to that point of zero profit. That's the only place where things are going to stop shifting. And when things stop shifting, we call it equilibrium. The equilibrium, the long run equilibrium in these markets is the point where there's zero profit being made. Because if there's positive profit, people will enter. If there's negative profit, people will leave. And when people enter or leave, it changes that price back toward that point where there's zero profit. And so we have this long run supply curve over here in the market. Our short run supply curves look like what we're used to, those upward sloping supply curves. In the long run, the supply curve is flat. In the long run, the supply curve just is at whatever that price is. That's our equilibrium price. That's the price we're going to sell for. Remember, supply is just the price you're going to sell for. The price you're going to sell for is that long run equilibrium price. In the long run, the price is going to be whatever that zero profit price is. Here's a little cleaner picture of that, of what we look like in the long run for a perfectly competitive market. In the long run, we'll have a flat supply curve in the market that dictates the price or the selling point for the firm such that profits are zero. And again, all of this is driven by that free entry, free exit thing. Because positive profits means people are going to enter the market. And when people enter the market, it drives prices back down to where profits are no longer positive. Right? And then negative profits means people are going to leave the market. And when people leave the market, it drives prices back up to where there's no longer a negative profit. Right? And the only place where we sort of balance out, where people stop coming and going, and where we're sort of at this happy, stable place, the only place of stability where we stop having coming and going and shifting, is the place where the firms are making zero profit. So why do you do it? Why do people sell beans if they can't earn an economic profit in the long run? This is where we remember the difference between economic profit and accounting profit. When a firm breaks even, they cover their explicit costs and implicit costs, right? So remember, everything we're looking at in these pictures are economic costs, which include your opportunity costs. And so it doesn't mean you have no money in zero profit, zero economic profit. It doesn't mean you have no money in your pocket at the end of the day. In fact, it means you do have money in your pocket at the end of the day. It means your accounting profit is positive, because remember, accounting profit is always higher than economic profit. Economic profit takes your accounting of profit and then subtracts out of there your opportunity costs, right? And so if you have zero economic profit, it means that you actually have money in your pocket at the end of the day. Your accounting profit is positive. All it means is that you couldn't have done any better. Your opportunity costs are just barely covered. So you've broken even in terms of your opportunity costs. It means your next best alternative wouldn't have been any better for you. So zero economic profit isn't really as bad as it sounds. It doesn't mean you have no money. It means you actually do have money. You have accounting profit. And it means your other alternative, your opportunity cost, wasn't any better than what you're doing now. You couldn't have earned more elsewhere, and you wouldn't have earned less elsewhere. Zero economic profit means you've just barely covered your opportunity costs, and you have some money left over. So you do have your accounting profit. So this is a long chapter. It took 3 videos to get through it. But here's the sort of summary of it. In a competitive markets, firms have no control over price. They're price takers, which leads to that flat marginal revenue demand price curve on all our pictures, right? And to maximize profit, they're going to choose their output so that marginal revenue equals marginal cost. And then they're going to shut down if that price is ever anywhere below the minimum average variable cost. That's a short run shut down. In the long run, you'll shut down if your price is below your total cost. And then we just saw that profits and losses act as signals in these markets, and so people will enter if if there's profit to be made, and they'll leave if there are losses, and so we'll always end up in this long run equilibrium where we've got zero economic profit. Um, and we'll see as we move forward into other chapters that competitive markets serve as an ideal benchmark. You may be thinking as we're going through this, yeah, but no market, even the market for beans, doesn't look exactly like this. There's always some sort of differentiation. This bean farmer says his soil is better than that bean farmer, right? So we're not always, no market has identical products such as this perfectly competitive market. We do have markets that are very similar to a perfectly competitive market, and so it's not useless to think about how these things work. But anything with the word perfect in it probably means you're not going to find a great example of it in real world. But we study this because it's a great benchmark to compare other market structures to. So as we move forward, we'll kind of look back and think about how the different markets differ from perfectly competitive markets and how that changes our outcomes.